And on behalf of the Lynn Teachers Union, the teachers, paraprofessionals, and therapists, I thank all of you for taking interest in public education and the Lynn Public Schools. Our public schools represent Lynn's commitment to helping all children dream their dreams and achieve them. All children in our community deserve the promise of a great public education that prepares them for a bright future. To make that promise a reality, we need elected officials who will make our children and the public schools they attend a priority. The Lynn Mayor plays a critical role in the operation of Lynn schools. The Mayor serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the city, responsible for the allocation of funds to support and staff our schools. He or she also serves as the chairperson of the Lynn School Committee, charged with providing all students in all schools an equitable opportunity for academic success. I'd like you to welcome Tim Phelan, Judy Kennedy to our forum. The forum is going to give us an opportunity to hear from the candidates on educational issues. The questions were solicited from our members and were developed through our political action committee. Each candidate will have an opportunity to give some opening remarks, closing remarks, and we will alternate each of the questions as they're afforded an opportunity to address each of the issues. I'd like to welcome Dave Angeli. Dave is a teacher here at the Breed Middle School. He's a Lynn resident, and he's a father of 2 children here in the Lynn Public Schools. Thank you, Dave, and welcome.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Flip of a coin, Judy won. So who's going to go first? We could have some opening statements.
Right now?
Oh.
Okay. Everybody can hear me all right? Okay. Thank you all so much for coming out to the debate tonight. As you know, my name is Judy Kennedy. I am the current mayor of Lynn. I am also currently the chair of the Lynn School Committee by virtue of that office of mayor. I feel in a lot of ways that I've come full circle in the city of Lynn. Because back in 1991, when I first ran for public office, I ran for a school committee seat. And I was successful in obtaining that, and I spent 3 terms on the school committee. In the interim, served 5 terms on the city council as a councilor at large, and now here I am back on the school committee as the chair by virtue of the office of mayor. I think most of you know my background, so I'm not going to spend the time on my background. I am a public school graduate. Went to Lincoln. Went to Breed, not this Breed, went to classical, not that classical. I shut down every building I went to, it seems. But I think that my opponent has a really, really good slogan that he has been using throughout this campaign. And that is, believe in Lynn. I do believe in Lynn. And more specifically, I believe in the Lynn Public Schools. I have 2 children. They're now 17 and 15. They have been products of the Lynn Public Schools from the time they were 5 years old. My son went to the Fallon Pre-K, back when Fallon had a Pre-K, and my daughter went to the Harrington Pre-K. They then both went to Aborn, they both went to Pickering, and today, I can hardly believe it, but my son is a senior at Lynn English High School, and my daughter is a sophomore at Lynn English High School. So being on the school committee is far more than an objective position for me. I mean, I certainly try to be objective in all the decisions that I make, but I also know that whatever decisions I make are going to affect my children, and I want to make sure that I am doing the very best for them, as I want to do the very best for all of the 15,000 students here in the Lynn school system. So I thank you very much for having me tonight, and I look forward to a very enjoyable and informative debate.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, the Teachers Union. Judy won the coin flip. She seems to have been winning a lot of things lately. But I want to thank my wife as well for coming. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen tonight. I know I had some general ideas of opening statements, if I was going to be standing or sitting, so I put a couple of cheat sheets together here. But a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Lynn. I've lived here my entire life. My family has been in Lynn since a little after 1800. I graduated from Brickett School, Easton Junior High School, when it was still Easton Junior High School, Lynn English High School. My 8 brothers and sisters went to Lynn English High School. My grandfather went to Lynn English High School. My wife has been teaching in the Lynn school system for a substantial period of time. Is the program specialist, I believe, is her title now at the Connery Elementary School. My sister-in-law teaches here. My sister Elizabeth is taught in the Lynn public school system. But I look at things and sometimes people focus on, I think, the wrong things. In the years that I've held public office, I've always heard whoever the mayor is, always referred to as the chairman of the school committee. I have never, and this isn't a knock on the existing mayor or any other former mayor, ever heard of the mayor called the education mayor. Nobody has ever been called the education mayor, and I think what's happened is somewhere along the way that's been lost, and we need to get it back. It seems that administrations over time make other things in city government their priorities, and not education. I believe the future success and economic viability of the city of Lynn is inextricably tied to the success of our public schools. And that's, education is critical to job creation, crime, higher education, parental skills, quality neighborhoods. Our schools can contribute to their communities' quality of life and attract families to stay in the city of Lynn. One of the first things I always hear when young families are looking to raise their family are, what are the school systems like? And they go to the school system. I want us to invest in our collective future. We need to broaden our powers to intervene before a school fails. While certain student growth percentile is improving in some areas, approximately 27% of our students aren't graduating in 4 years, and the vast majority of our schools are below the state average. I know education, city to city, isn't always on an equal playing field, but there's substantial room for improvement if teachers are provided the tools to do so. Teaching is far from the days of you do it solely because you're dedicated and you love kids. Everybody's dedicated and you love kids, but it requires professionals to learn, to internalize, to implement, to modify what they've learned, to adapt, to interpret on an hour-to-hour, minute-by-minute basis. Elected officials must recognize these attributes and provide the tools for success. Otherwise, we'll never accomplish any substantial education goals, and it'll be a disservice to what we're trying to do as our collective future. Every aspect of education, no matter how minimal, would be the priority of my administration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those opening statements. Tim, you're going to have the first question. In your own words, how would you characterize the state of the Lynn Public Schools? Given where you think the schools are and where they need to go, what are the top 3 strategies you would pursue to strengthen our schools?
I think the state of our schools is improving, but nowhere near where it needs to be. It's great news due to the hard work of the staff and the principals of the Harrington and the Connery Elementary School, that they've improved from level 4 to level 3 schools. But a level 3 school, we have, I think, 13 of them in the city of Lynn right now, are still defined as in the bottom 20% of performing schools in Massachusetts, and that's not good enough. I know we are considered an urban school, but we need to continue to close the achievement gap between us and the state numbers. You said 3 things?
Yes, top 3 strategies.
3 strategies. I think the first strategy should be that teachers need more prep time and collaboration time. I don't think they have enough. People always want to put up a stop sign after a pedestrian gets hit by a car. And the level 4 schools, I know because my wife lives it. She's lived it for the past 3 years and brings it home. And she would talk about all the extra resources that they got after they became a level 4 school. You know, and Harrington, I think a couple of others, but they both have regular pre-K, librarians, program specialists, arts, music teacher, gym teacher. And what that does is it affords more prep time and collaboration time for those teachers so that they can prepare and do what they need to. They just don't have the time to do it. And, you know, schools shouldn't always have to be in a level of crisis to, you know, to get something done. You know, we have to be more forward-thinking. You know, another thing on flex time. You know, if there are, you know, sometimes, you know, instructional teaching, tier 1 doesn't work. So you go to tier 2, where someone needs a little extra help, and that doesn't work. So should we be able to, you know, provide a CIT, a reading specialist, maybe come in a little later so they can stay after school a little more and provide that flex time to both the teacher, you know, working with the union so they can give it to that student that can't get it during the regular education, you know, time period. That would be one, additional collaboration and prep time. Second would be additional parental involvement, community engagement. You know, I anticipated, because it's a, you know, I learn a lot from my wife. I do, and I realize that I am not an educator. You know, I'm an elected official. But children whose parents are involved in education, you know, they perform at higher levels. When parents know how school works, they become involved in their parents' education. You know, when schools effectively engage parents, parent involvement increases and student outcomes improve. You know, I think it's the basis of all education that we should. You know, I recently learned about a program that it just wowed me. The academic parent-teacher team for, I'm not sure what that means because they kind of.
Yes, so what we're doing is, for the interest of time, because we have about 8-10 questions.
Okay.
We have an hour, maybe more. So we're trying to keep it to about 3 minutes.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Sure. Well, let me just go to my third piece then.
This will be 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and this will be the 3 minutes.
I'm a little colorblind, just to let you know. I'll know that means something.
I'll throw my water bottle at him.
And you know, the last thing, I think that we need, you know, technological improvements in the city of Lynn from an educational standpoint. You know, there's intervention software that's available now. You know, iRead programs that will, you know, be able to teach lesson plans not only in school but at home, so parents can access, you know, software educational plans and do, you know, lessons at home, and teachers can get that data. You know, when parents are doing its parental engagement, when they're getting this information at home, and it's to be a more efficient use of the time, it will reduce costs in the city, will increase parental involvement, it collectively improves student achievement. You know, I just think it's a no-brainer, and we need to continue to move in that direction.
Thank you.
These are in no particular order, but the 3 areas that I would most like to see continued improvements in are, first of all, school safety. That was brought home to all of us in December of 2012. And soon after that, the school committee met and had a number of discussions about what we could do to keep our kids safe. We were already pretty far ahead of the curve compared to other school districts in the area, but we felt that we could do more. We have had Officer Bob Ferrari from the police department doing an excellent job with keeping our students safe, but we still wanted to see if we could do more. So as a result, we've been installing outside doors that are more safe than what we had had in the schools prior to this. We are trying to install locks on the interiors classroom doors so that, God forbid, if somebody should come in, they can't just run door to door. The teachers will have the ability to lock up their classroom and to isolate their classroom. We have added SROs in the last 4 years to the point that every middle school now has a school resource officer, and we are installing more camera systems. So security certainly should be one of the top 3 priorities for sure. As Councilor Phelan mentioned, parental involvement is so important, and we've gotten some really good head starts on that with the wraparound zones that have been initiated. They do emphasize parental involvement, and they've been a great model for us to see what works and what doesn't. We have also instituted an MCAS education night. Those are going to be held, I believe, October 1st and October 2nd, so the parents can come and really ask questions. What does this MCAS score mean? What can my child gain from having this good MCAS score? How can I help my child if this MCAS score isn't what I think it should be? So that's parental involvement is number 2. Number 3, I would have to term it as either more flexible learning time or longer learning time. I know so often teachers have to teach to a test. We have standards we have to meet. Some of them are pretty rigid and inflexible, and it really is a disservice to the children who I think should be learning basic facts. And I'll give you an example. My daughter, who is now in the 10th grade, a couple of years ago, it was February, and I said, do you know what today is? She said, President's Day. I said, which presidents are we celebrating? And she said, Lincoln and Washington. I said, what number president was President Lincoln? And she said, oh, we don't learn that till the 10th grade. Now, I'm a big student of American history. I do think that every child should know who President Lincoln was and what number he was in our succession of presidents by the 10th grade. So those are 3 areas that I would really like to see improved, and I see I'm getting the red card, so I'll let my answer to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Judy, this question we're going to start with?
I have my point.
Did we get a follow-up? I thought-
Oh, sure. Yes,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Grant. Yeah, I just wanted, because I talked too long the first time. I think, one of the things that, is you can't just educate the academic piece of a child. To be successful in an urban setting, you really have to try to educate the entire child, whether it's with social worker help, whether it's making your school a community center, having some schools have health centers in the schools. It is a tremendous asset to those schools. Parent liaisons are in such a limited amount of schools that I think that's deficient. The wraparound zone is great because it addresses those particular, the psychiatric end of things and the social end of things, and I think it's wonderful. And one of the things that I started to talk about was the academic parent-teacher team. What some schools are doing now, which is incredible, which should be expanded and potentially mandated, is on parent-teacher nights or open houses. They come in and they sit down at an open house, and they get a number, who their child is, so it's confidential. And they put up on the board a graph, and let's say it's a early education, and it's sight words, and you can see where your child is compared to every other person in that class. And then what you do to bring the parent involved, you reach a goal with that particular parent, and you give them something to do at home so that they can come back and do something at home, bring it back to the school, and have achievement goals together. And that's the type of thinking and evolution that we need to get to try to become on a level playing field with other municipalities.
Thank you. Judy?
Yes.
Yes.
We did send a team out to Denver, I think it was Denver, we were somewhere in Colorado, to look at that APTT. And I agree with Councilor Phelan, it's a fantastic program. It is done not only at that one session, but over a number of sessions throughout the year, depending on how involved the school system wants to get in that program. But the results are really incredible, and they are available on YouTube. They have a long video and then a shorter, more concise video, but both of them show the incredible level to which parents can become involved in their child's education.
Great, thank you. All right, Judy. Second question to you. On September 17th, Lynn voters overwhelmingly approved the Marshall Middle School construction project. While this is a great development for our city, there are many other facilities in our system that require improvements. Pickering Middle School may be the most urgent. In this tough fiscal climate, what we would do to ensure that our schools receive the renovations and improvements that our students, parents, and educators deserve. And specifically, relating to Pickering, we will exercise your leadership to fast track and prioritize this project.
It is ready to go into the MSBA pipeline. I'll answer the Pickering issue first, and then I'll go on into a little bit of a broader view of this. First of all, thank you to all of the voters who supported the Marshall Middle School. I know some of us had some trepidation on the school committee and elsewhere that, oh, I don't know, that's not a ward where a lot of the voters will be coming from. The people in Ward 1 and Ward 2 and Ward 7 will not be benefiting from this school. 81 to 19%. I think I've seen some races where the blanks get more than 19%. That is truly a mandate. And it truly shows the good sense of the Lynn voters that they know that education should be a top priority for the city. And I think one of the most effective campaigns that we had in promoting the idea of a new Marshall Middle School was simply showing the conditions of the old Marshall Middle School. And even those of us who will never have a child in middle school again can relate to that. We wouldn't want our children learning next to a sign that says, "Do not open this window." We wouldn't want to see the crumbling debris on the floor from the walls that are not being properly held up. I mean, it's not the fault of the ISD or the maintenance people. They've done a wonderful, wonderful job, but, you know, this is our next priority. And we have formed a committee, a subcommittee on the school committee. Rick Scarborough and Charlie Gallo are kind of at the forefront of that. And we are looking to identify priorities for the next 2 school buildings down the line. Pickering is certainly next in our sights. And then after that, we're looking at both Cobbett and Tracy. Those schools have served their usefulness, and it's time to correct them and to build new schools for both of those student populations. With respect to what we've already done, we've instituted an energy efficiency program through TRAIN, and they are making the schools a little bit more cost effective. I have also given hundreds of thousands of dollars to the ISD to replace boiler systems, to take care of asbestos problems that we've had in the schools. When we can't do the major renovations, we try to do minor spruce-ups. Over the last 4 summers, we've been able to have the custodians target one or two schools for deep cleaning. They paint the walls, they scrub everything, they do it on weekends, they get done before September. It's a fact that we have an aging school infrastructure, but as I said, the plan is in place. Pickering is next. The MSBA is aware of it. Cobbett and Tracy will follow.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. I'd also like to compliment the people from the Marshall Middle School, the team that they put together, the committee. I think I saw Jim Ridley here earlier today, all the great work that you guys have done. Since early 2011, I've voted 13 separate times, from feasibility studies to transfers to eminent domain to ballot questions, all in favor of the Marshall Middle School. But we have to be, real. And when we look at the existing condition of our schools, I think it's great that the custodians go in and clean and wash the schools during the summertime. I mean, but last time I checked, that's their job. What are we going to do while we're waiting for Pickering Junior High School to be built? Because kids are going to be going through the school system, and Marshall's going to start in, who knows the exact date, and who knows the date that it's going to be finished. We have projected dates. There's a new regulation now coming from the Treasurer's office that you're slowed down from moving your next project forward until the project that you have ongoing is at a certain level of completion. So the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure that if everyone knows how to play baseball, everyone knows how to play soccer, but you shouldn't be playing baseball on a soccer field. You have to build a relationship with the Treasurer's office and the Governor's office to try to improve and fast track those monies when you're looking at building bigger schools. But the reality is, because we have an aging school system, everything's falling apart. Everything's falling apart across the city. So what are we going to do while it's happening? I have a list from Inspectional Services that the repairs that need to be done are upwards of $22 million, and that doesn't include Lynn Classical, which has not been addressed and is the elephant in the room, which appears to be another $14 million on top of it. So besides hoping and praying that the state's going to give us money for additional schools, what do? Where do we get money from? What I will propose, the city of Lynn owns a piece of property on Route 1 that has been deemed not to be Lynn Woods, that is in Lynnfield. It is on Route 1 in Lynnfield. It is right next to the fat cactus, the old naked fish. It has a billboard on it. It has been sitting there, underutilized, nothing's happening with it. What I propose is that the city of Lynn either sells, leases, or develops that site and puts it in a dedicated revolving account solely to address our falling down buildings. It can't be used for anything else. It only will fix those problems from a structural standpoint. And, you know, one of the things that I was criticized about prior to the primary election is not being specific in what I want to do. Well, that's one of the specific things that I would do to set up that revolving account so there is a dedicated fund. If it's worth what people are talking about that it's worth, you could probably do a substantial amount of work on the interest only. Thank you.
I'll just give a quick follow-up to that. I'm well aware of the property in Lynnfield. In fact, I have walked the property in Lynnfield. The problem is, as many of you may know, we have been in an extended recession. Real estate prices are down significantly from their highs of the bubbles of several years ago. I'm not prepared to sell a valuable piece of land in a down real estate market. It doesn't make any economic sense. I am, however, interested in looking at whether there are some lease opportunities for us. And in fact, I have been in discussions with a developer who wants to build a mini mall with a big box anchor store up behind the fat cactus. But in order to have the access to and from Route 1, that developer is going to have an easement to come over our land. It would not be the same amount of money as a one-shot sale of the land would be. However, it would be ongoing income for the city of Lynn. We would not be forced to sell a valuable asset in the down market. And that money can be utilized. I don't know, because the city of Lynn does have so many other pressing needs that I would be able to devote it all to a school building fund, because so much of what we are doing is taking care of 80% reimbursement situations when we can get them from the MSBA. However, I have funded $750,000 on one line item and over $1 million on a second line item in the fiscal year to take care of the school building needs. That's over $1 million a year. We're doing what we can do. The fact is that the upkeep and the revolution of building a new school every 10 years or every 15 years didn't take place. And now we're paying for those procrastinations, and we have to get back on track. And I do think that the four-school, 25-year-old plan is a great way to get back on track.
Tim, short rebuttal?
Yeah, very briefly, just with all due respect, there was no mention of the Route 1 property. There was nothing in writing about the Route 1 property. Nobody talked about this as a revenue-generating income location for the city of Lynn or its schools until I brought it up at a previous debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Tim, this question's to you. Last year, the state administered a survey of educators in every district across the state. While Lynn educators generally reported that their school is a good place to work and learn, only 56% said the teachers have an appropriate level of influence on decision-making in their school. What would you do to help ensure that the voices of Lynn's teachers are heard in decisions that affect their students?
I think you should have school-based decision-making. I don't believe in top-down administering. I think teachers need a voice. I think that it creates buy-in with what you're trying to do if you have a vision. Teachers should have a seat at the table. Participative decision-making, has been identified as an important contributor to successful education management. It not only facilitates the implementation of decision, but also leaves the teachers feeling respected, empowered, builds trust. It increases school effectiveness, strengthens morale, and teamwork. So I think the talent and the people that are on the front lines, the expertise that they have is a resource that should be tapped into before decisions are arbitrarily made, especially by people like me if I sat on the school committee. Okay.
And Judy?
I can't imagine that any company could be successful if all of the decisions were made by somebody in isolation and never had input from the people that actually have to implement those decisions. One of the things the Lynn Police do is they have a program, it's called Hop for a Day, and all of the high-ranking officials go out, put on their street blues, they ride in the patrol route for the day. I know several times I've caught the chief of police doing that. The point being, and the analogy being, that sometimes you don't really know how your decisions are affecting people until you can get down into the rank and file and see how those decisions work in real life. There's a reason why that show, Undercover Boss, was so successful. It's because too many of those CEOs didn't know what was going on around them. And frankly, I'm surprised, because if every principal in the Lynn Public Schools is not having regular staff meetings, that's an issue. I wouldn't think it would have to be discussed as a school committee policy, but if that's not happening, then certainly I would be in favor of doing that, because nobody knows how effective or ineffective the school policies are more than the people who are implementing them day after day.
Great, thanks, Tim. Is there on the button? Okay, next question, Judy. Research shows the critical link between early childhood education and student success. Lynn is proud of its full-day kindergarten program. We also have a pre-K program, but there aren't enough seats to meet parental demand. What are your thoughts on how Lynn can expand its investments in the critical area of early childhood education? And will you commit to maintaining Lynn's investment in full-day kindergarten, even in the face of fiscal challenges?
As to the second part of the question, absolutely. But I never was a believer in half-day kindergarten anyway. It just seemed as though by the time you could get the kids off the bus, undress, reverse it in the end of the 2.5-hour period, give them a snack, make sure everybody's settled, there was no real time for learning. And I've read many studies that have shown that early education is the foundation for later success in learning. I will absolutely defend to the end our early education programs. Now, all of you know we had difficulty even with our kindergarten programs this year because we didn't have enough room. And the superintendent proposed and the school committee approved a kindergarten center, which at last count, what I had seen, had 265 students going to it. That was only so that we wouldn't have to have 30 children in our kindergarten classes. I would love to see the pre-K program expanded. Unfortunately, right now it's done by lottery. The question becomes, and we ask this question almost every day in the school system, where do we have the space? Certainly the tech annex was not an ideal space to have the kindergarten center, but we really couldn't identify any other space that could be converted. We've looked at St. Michael's School, we've looked over at St. Patrick's, we have looked at a number of places that could be for lease in the city, and they're simply not appropriate as school buildings. So yes, I am a big, big supporter of early childhood education, and I will certainly do whatever is necessary to ensure that the children of Lynn can continue to receive all-day kindergarten as a right, and not as an option, not as a privilege, but as a right.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. I also am a huge advocate of early childhood education, and far too many children enter school non-prepared. When unprepared children, they begin school behind. They tend to fall further behind. Children who are at risk of not doing well in school gain significant benefits from quality early education. Children need to come to school and be ready to go to school by the time they hit first grade. Cognitively, it improves school performance, raises math and language ability, sharpens attention and thinking skills, reduces special education placement, lowers school dropout rates, and increases graduation rates, socially and emotionally. It improves and strengthens interactions with peers. It decreases problem behaviors. It encourages more exploratory behavior, and it helps adjustment to the demands of formal schooling. All the studies say that if you have pre-K and K, what it does, it ultimately leads to higher earnings, more likely to hold a job, people committing fewer crimes, and just a benefit for the community. So the thing I always hear, I love the fact that we do all-day K. That's great. But the issue is pre-K. What do we do with pre-K? And I always hear, we don't have the space, we don't have the space. You know, and that, to me, that's not good enough. We have the space. We just don't have the time. So what do? We have to do something different. Because kids going to pre-K should not be left out in the cold because they don't win the lottery. So what do? When do we have the space? We have the space in the summertime. If I'm on the school committee, and I'm fortunate enough to win this election, I will commit right now that we will do pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds year-round in the summertime. We have the space, the principals are there, the cost wouldn't be astronomical, and it's an option, it's thinking out of the box, it's something new that we've never done, it'd be the first time in the city's history, and it's something that would pay dividends for our MCAS numbers, our graduation rates, for everything along the line. And if you want to compete with other school systems beyond just saying we're doing well against other urban school systems, this is the way you have to do it. You have to start early, and you have to make a commitment and focus on what's important.
Thank you. Judy, would you like to rebuttal?
I think we both agree.
I'm sorry?
I said I think we both agree. They're both very good programs.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. It's for you, Tim, to start. The state is projecting that $8 million will be diverted from the Lynn Public Schools to charter schools this year. Furthermore, one charter school in Lynn, Kip Academy, is seeking a major expansion of seats, and 2 additional schools are seeking first-time approval to open in Lynn. Critics contend the charter schools drain scarce resources from district schools while failing to serve the neediest and most expensive populations, such as special education students and English language learners. Proponents claim the charters spur competition and innovation. And what do you see as the proper role of charter schools in the Lynn community?
Well, right now, the major problem I have is the funding mechanism. There's actually a bill in the legislature right now that people here will lift the cap on charter schools, and I don't know if people actually understand what that means. It lifts the cap on the percentage of money that a school system would need to pay. Currently, there's a complicated formula that caps the financial contribution at upwards to 18%, which we're not there yet. This would remove that. It's phased in over time. We'll remove that. I think, first of all, we have to be aggressive as a city to fight that. Because what's happening is other schools are coming in and looking at it as a money-making mechanism. The problems that I have, I think it's the Hathaway School and the Phoenix Academy that want to come in. Hathaway School got rejected because they were a private school. They were a private money-making school. So they got rejected. They've reconfigured what they want to do to come into the system now and try to, again, take money from the Lynn school system. You know, teachers over at the KIPP Academy, they don't have to be licensed. Teachers here have to be licensed. You know what bothers me the most, because by all accounts, people say they get a good education over there. What bothers me more about the charter schools is come March and April of every single year, kids that they've taken and enrolled in their system and have kept them from September to that time frame that aren't doing well, they show them the door and they send them back to the Lynn public school system. And that's not my idea of education. I think that we need to address that they don't discriminate against kids that have special needs. They don't discriminate against English language learners. They don't take the same percentage that they do. But the state has to fix the funding mechanism so that it's not draining resources. The other thing you have to look at is why. Why are parents choosing to go to the KIPP Academy and leave the Lynn school system? Why are they choosing to go to other charter schools outside the city of Lynn that we have to pay for? And until that question is answered, if the state law doesn't change, it's going to continue to hurt us.
Thank you. Judith?
I agree with Councilor Phelan, and I've said this for many years. The problem is really the funding mechanism used to fund the charter schools, and I would not be in favor of lifting the current cap. I have figures here that I received from the school department that in this past year, from October 2012 to present, taken from our Chapter 70 money, $8,457,565. That's $12,065 per student. That's money that could be well used in the Lynn Public Schools. And I don't think it's fair that the charter schools are able to take that money. And more particularly, and Councilor Phelan talked about March and April, showing the kids the door. The magic date in the charter school world is October 1st, because their reimbursement calculations are based on their student population as of October 1st. So once they can get that number, and if you look at their student enrollment, you would find that right around October 1st of any given year, they're at their peak enrollment. Then those children that are not performing up to the charter school standards, whatever those standards may be, get shipped back to the Lynn Public Schools. So it really is unfair in the way not only those schools are funded, but in the way they are able to pick and choose, despite the fact that they hold a lottery in the spring for the seats, they can pick and choose who remains. And I would like to see that changed as well.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
No.
Okay. Judy? Are you satisfied with the current amount of state and local dollars spent on the Lynn Public Schools? Do you think school aid should be increased at the local level? And if yes, how would you raise this additional money?
Do you think I should have additional state aid coming into the system? Or do I think the city should contribute more?
Do you think it should be increased at the local level?
Well, we have been meeting our maintenance of effort. I know that there's been some discussion about whether that number has been met, but just to explain to the audience a little bit, the maintenance of effort is a really complicated formula, and a lot of it depends on us making predictions. And I sat down with the superintendent of schools this year to figure out what figure we would need to contribute from the city to get to that maintenance of effort number. We did come up with a figure, and in fact, I increased that figure by another $400,000 just to give us a little bit of a cushion. And if, in fact, you don't make that maintenance of effort number in one school year, you make it up in effect in the next year. The only time you get penalized is if you don't come within 95% of your target. And don't forget, the target is not given to you until after the state does its formula, which is after you've funded the schools. So it's a little bit of a guessing game. But we have met that target. We have met that 95% target every year. And last year we were a little bit short. The city contributed the money. More importantly, though, I think is the ways in which the city is restricted in using that money that is given to us by the state. We've all heard already about the infrastructure problems in the city of Lynn. I can't use any of the state aid to improve our buildings. So we have windows that are stuck in the wintertime, and the kids are trying to open them because the boilers are going full blast, and there's no way to regulate the amount of heat that's coming out of the boilers. So in the schools that don't have the windows able to open, the kids walk to school in their t-shirts, and you'll say, come on, put a coat on, it's 40 degrees. No, I'm getting into a car and then I'm going into a hot room. That's not right. In the other schools, when the boilers are blowing too hot, they open the windows. This is where a lot of our money is wasted.
And I would rather that we get more flexibility in the money that comes to us from the state, and maybe get a little more concrete information about what our number is supposed to be from the state. That would certainly make things better. The other problem that we have, ironically enough, is that when we save money on the city side, we're actually hurting ourselves with regard to making our maintenance of effort figure. For example, when I went into the collective bargaining program with all of the unions in the city so that we stayed out of the GIC, we saved about $4 million off of our healthcare costs that year. Unfortunately, then, that higher number of healthcare costs did not go into our maintenance of effort figure, and I had to make up that savings, basically, on the school side, because otherwise I wasn't going to meet the maintenance of effort. So, yes, if we can get more money, have more control over it, and have it spent more judiciously, absolutely, we should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
You know, there are different things. There's a difference between maintenance of effort and net school spending. And last year, we were $1.6 million short in net school spending. It was within the 5% or the 95% as mentioned. But we got a letter from the state indicating you have to make up that money, which we did at the end of the fiscal year. You put that money in. The state allows you to come within that 5% of net school spending. And the finance person from the school department does a projection. And he's within percentage points of accuracy. And has been since he's gotten here. However, you still have to make up that money. It's when it goes beyond the 5% that you have to make up the money anyway, but there are potential penalties. The projection this year is that we are going to be almost $4.2 million short in net school spending. Is it a projection? The answer is yes. That projection is outside of the 5% of allowable delay in passing that money. And if we don't come up with that money, there's going to be a Chapter 70 penalty on top of that. So before the end of this year, if that number turns out to be accurate, which again historically has been within very small percentages, we're going to have to come up with $4.1 million to just to meet net school spending. And I have a letter from Mr. McHugh here who's giving me that analysis.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
We funded the school system at northwards of $110 million. I can't remember if it was 114, 118, somewhere in there. The $4.1 million, we can all do the math. That's 4% of the school budget. It is within the 5%. That money, I didn't invent anything new here. This is something that has been done since before I became mayor. And it's almost impossible to try to guess. We can base it on last year and come up with our figures. I came up with my figure with the superintendent of schools. And as I said, I added to the figure that she and I both arrived at as a minimum level of net school spending. So we are not in any danger of penalties. You heard the figure, 4.1 million. You can look at the budget online. It was somewhere northwards of $110 million. The 4.1 is not going to be anywhere near that 5% drop-off point at which we will incur penalties. It's simply not going to happen.
Great, thanks. Tim, would you like to respond?
I would. That's actually not the number that's used. It's the city in kind contribution formula that's used. With all due respect. Last year, the city of Lynn got $7.1 million more this upcoming year in Chapter 70 funding. The city budget was increased $115 million to $118.8. It's actually 3.4. The city got is getting $7.1 million more in Chapter 70 funding, and 3.4 is being put to education. There's a loophole in the law that allows that Chapter 70 money to be put over to the city side to pay for anything that touches the school department Well, if an ISD guy comes over here, we can take a percentage of his workers' comp and doing that. That's what's happening with the Chapter 70 money in the city of Lynn to offset expenses on the other side. Especially if you look at the budget, with all due respect, where everything is being cut on the other side, and health insurance has leveled out at approximately $33 million a year. It's money that could be going to education that is not going to education.
Thank you. Okay, Tim, this question's to you. Parents often indicate their interest in being involved in their children's education. What specifically would you do to strengthen the involvement of families in the education of their children?
Well, one of the things that we talked about earlier, I believe, is the APPT, which I think is very, very, very important. You need to get parents invested in what you're doing in the school system, because if you get them invested in what's happening in the school system, you empower them when they're at home to do that. You know, there are cultures that parents won't even talk to teachers because they hold teachers in such high esteem. And we have to make sure that we develop a school as a community as a whole, as we mentioned earlier. And I think I answered a lot of this question with, one of my top 3 issues that I wanted to, that I think are the most important in the school system. And that's one of them. You can't effectively educate a child without parental involvement. One of the things I'd like to see at the high school level, high school parents should be able to go home, get online, and see exactly what their kids are doing in real time. They should see their test scores, they should see their quiz scores, they should see whether or not they turn their homework in on time, they should see their attendance rate. They should be able, on a weekly basis, go in and see where they are. Because teenagers are teenagers. They say one thing, they do something else. Did you finish your homework? Yes. How'd you do on those tests? Great. This will be an opportunity to, allow parents to actually see it and get involved themselves.
Great, thank you. Judith?
Well, I also would say that we both answered it partially with regard to the earlier question, but one of the things that we've really taken advantage of in the last couple of years in our house is reaching out to guidance counselors. Too often our guidance counselors are really, really underutilized. And both my children happen to have the same guidance counselor over at Lynn English. I would say we are in touch, whether by phone or by email, at least every other week. She keeps on top of them in the school. When something is going on that she feels we may not be aware of or we need to be aware of, she'll call us up. And the other thing that we've taken advantage of is being able to look, the good teachers will put the assignments online. So parents can just pop online and see what their child is expected to do. And they don't quite substitute for the blocking them at the front door, holding the car keys, saying, did you finish all your homework yet? But it definitely is a good way for the parents to stay involved. And as I had said earlier, those MCAS reporting nights are good. Councilor Phelan and I both agree about the APTP. And as I said, I'd like to see the lessons learned from the wraparound zone being applied on a broader basis to the other schools in the city, because I do think that they provide the parents more opportunity to get involved.
Great, thanks. Our last question of the evening is to you, Judy. The Newtown, Connecticut tragedy is heartbreaking, incomprehensible. Talk about school safety and the need for keeping our students and educators safe.
Okay, as I said, I did mention this one as well earlier. After that, the school committee held a number of executive session meetings, and the reason why they were held in executive session was we didn't want to discuss our security flaws out in the general public. Our meetings are on TV, and anybody could have heard where we were fearing that our weak points or our vulnerability points might have been. But as a result of those meetings, the city committed to strengthen the doors on all of the schools. Some of the schools had almost like a little bicycle lock that was holding the doors together. And if you knew how to wiggle it just right, you could get into the schools. We wanted to make sure that we had a policy and procedure in place where everybody who comes into the school checks in, shows positive identification, usually deposits either a license or their car keys at the office, and is then allowed to proceed through the school wearing a visitor's badge. And most of the people in the city of Lynn know me, but I follow those same procedures. They don't cut any slack for anybody. You still have to show your ID, and you still have to walk in and be wearing that visitor's badge. We also have the SROs in all the schools. I also talked about having the internal door locks on the interior classrooms. And Officer Ferrari, with the cameras, we have some cameras that have the ability to be presenting a feed right into the police station. So I think that the school system in the city of Lynn is way ahead of the curve compared to some of the other schools in this area, school systems in this area, as far as ensuring that our children and our teachers are safe throughout the school day.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. On the city council in December, when we voted for the bond, I think it was 3 months before the school committee voted in favor of funding on the bond the money to change all the internal locks in all the schools in the city of Lynn. Unfortunately, that didn't pass through the council. We were requested by the police department not to talk about it publicly because they didn't want the public to know about the inadequacies of the locking of the internal doors in elementary schools, which is a priority. The money was eventually allocated, which I'm glad it was allocated. I think it's good having SROs in the school system. It's good that we have locked facilities, but some schools, I think English has 27 exits and entrances. I think that if we're concerned with safety, represent my wife, that we should look into actually different camera systems outside on a real-time basis so that we can see, the new schools are being developed with straight lines so that a teacher can stick their head out the door and see a long period of time, as opposed to the old schools where the jigs and the jags and things like that. So, I think the safety right now is okay in the public school system.
Great, thank you. Okay, that concludes our evening. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank our two candidates.